February 4th, 1944. Outside Cassino, Italy. The rain had turned the valley into a brown, sucking swamp. Smoke drifted low across the shattered orchards as German Oberleutnant Karl Weiss raised his field glasses and froze. A Sherman. The same Sherman he had watched burn yesterday. Its turret, blackened from the fire, was unmistakable. Even the bent fender, curled like a broken fingernail, matched what he had noted in his report. Yet now, the tank rumbled forward again, engine coughing, treads chewing through the mud as if resurrected overnight. Weiss lowered the glasses, confused. No tank company, certainly no American one, could repair a knocked-out vehicle in less than a day. Not in this weather, not this close to the front. But the U.S. 1st Armored Division was advancing again, and the dead Sherman was very much alive. Across the valley, 200 meters behind the American tank line, a different scene had unfolded just hours earlier. Rain hammered the canvas roofs of the U.S. Ordnance mobile depots, pop-up workshops the Germans rarely ever saw. Inside, under dim lamps and clouds of cigarette smoke, mechanics crawled across hulls, swapping parts with a speed that seemed almost impossible. Staff Sergeant Raymond Cutter wiped a sleeve across his oil-streaked face. "Transmissions fried?" he shouted over the clatter of portable compressors. Technician 4th grade Franklin Marlowe, a short, wiry man who seemed to live inside engine compartments, answered without looking up. "Already pulled one from the salvage rack. Fits like a glove. Give me 90 minutes. 15 yards away, a wrecker truck groaned as it lifted the burned Sherman, yesterday's casualty, onto makeshift timber supports. Its crew moved with the tempo of an assembly line. A replacement engine block slid in on greased rails. A new road wheel was hammered on to the suspension arm. A fresh coaxial machine gun was already stowed inside. This wasn't improvisation. It was procedure. Sherman tanks hadn't been built to be invincible. They were built to be fixable, fast. Every part had a twin, a match, a substitute waiting in a crate. Where German Panthers and Tigers required specialized machining and hours of adjustment, Shermans could be stripped and reassembled by men who had learned their craft in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Milwaukee. Cutter slapped the Sherman's glasses. "Get this girl moving. Battalion wants her online before sunrise." By 0500 hours, the tank roared to life. Its crew, Lieutenant Joel Nash and his 4 men, climbed aboard like men boarding a familiar horse. Nash gave the mechanics a tired salute. "You boys keep saving our hides." Winch spat blackened oil onto the mud. "That's the job, sir." And now, just after dawn, Nash's resurrected Sherman moved at the head of a wedge of armor, pushing toward Cassino's outskirts. Shells burst in the hills. German machine guns chattered from stone houses. The ground shook as American tanks advanced in a steady, relentless grind. On the German side of the valley, Oberleutnant Weiss still stared in disbelief. His radio crackled. "Herr Oberleutnant, that's Sherman, the one we hit last night." "I see it," Weiss interrupted sharply. "It is impossible." But there it was, the impossible. The rain thickened into a curtain as the resurrected tank fired, its 75mm cannon flashing, echoing through the valley. Weiss watched as another Sherman joined it, one missing a track the night before, now fully repaired. Then another, patched with fresh armor plates welded overnight. The American advance wasn't just persistent, it was self-healing. Weiss felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. He had studied American tactics, read intelligence briefs, analyzed armored doctrine, but nothing had prepared him for armored units that repaired themselves faster than the Germans could destroy them. He watched the resurrected Sherman pivot, fire again, and lead its platoon deeper into Cassino's outskirts. The battlefield seemed to bend around the Americans' ability to regenerate steel. For the first time, Weiss felt that the war's momentum was shifting, not only because of firepower, but because American tanks simply refused to stay dead. The resurrected Shermans surged ahead, pushing into the ruined outskirts of Cassino. Smoke curled from shattered windows. The distant rumble of artillery rolled across the valley. And behind the front line, hidden from German eyes. Another miracle of American logistics began unfolding again. Just before dawn, the 1st Armored Division's mobile repair network had already shifted position. The enemy didn't realize it yet, but the Americans didn't merely fight as an armored spearhead. They traveled with their own moving industrial base. In a muddy field, just south of the town of Sant'Angelo, Major Albert Donnelly unfolded a map on the hood of his Jeep. He was the officer commanding the division's forward maintenance battalion, a man whose battlefield was measured not in yards gained, but in hours saved. Beside him stood Chief Warrant Officer Ernest Hale, head of the mobile machine shop. Hale tapped a grease pencil on the map. Sherman casualties from yesterday's push: 6 mobility kills, 2 turret jams, 1 engine fire. We've already got 4 rolling again. He paused, listening to the distant thunder of the guns. Considering this weather, that's damn near a miracle. Donnelly shook his head. Miracle? No, it's Detroit planning and Army discipline. We keep this pace until Cassino breaks. Around them, the forward repair area buzzed with activity. Portable generators hummed, cutting torches spat arcs of blue-white fire. A wrecker truck hauled in another Sherman with its turret locked sideways from a jammed ring bearing. Sergeant Cutter, barely 3 hours removed from resurrecting Nash's burned-out tank, limped toward the newly arrived wreck, wiping his hands on a rag already soaked black. "Let's get her on the track stand," he barked to his team. "Check the ring gear. If it's bent, swap it." Private Lawson wiped the rain from his eyes. "Sir, this one's still warm." Cutter shrugged. "That just means we ain't late." Inside Hale's machine shop truck, essentially a rolling factory, technicians worked on spare mantlets, road wheels, mounts, and bearings. The walls were lined with drawers, each labeled with part numbers identical across nearly every Sherman model in the division. Interchangeability wasn't an accident, it was the strategy. What the Germans struggled to grasp was that the Sherman wasn't designed to dominate in armor thickness or gun size. It was designed for relentless availability. If a Panther or Tiger broke its final drive, the crew might as well walk home. If a Sherman lost its transmission, the Americans swapped it out before the next sunrise. Donnelly continued scanning the reports. Panzer Grenadiers counterattacked at 600 hours. Tanks are holding. If we can get 3 more Shermans back online before noon, Colonel Travers wants another armored thrust west of the monastery. Hale nodded. You'll have them. Across the field, tank engines thundered as repaired vehicles rolled off improvised ramps and back toward the front. Crews waved to the mechanics, men who, though rarely remembered in war stories, kept the armored thrust alive day after day. Meanwhile, on the German side of the valley, Oberleutnant Weiss's disbelief grew every time he pieced together a new report about uncanny American tanks. In a stone farmhouse, converted into a command post, Weiss stood before a table strewn with reconnaissance reports. His boots left muddy prints across the floor as he paced. Obergefrecher Müller, his radio man, watched him with concern. Herr Oberleutnant, Müller began cautiously. Another report just came in from the 9th Company. They confirmed seeing a Sherman with the same hull number as... I know which one it is, Weiss snapped sharply. Tell me how they repaired it overnight. With what equipment? With what supply lines? Müller hesitated. Perhaps it was not destroyed as thoroughly as we believed. Weiss slammed a hand on the table. It burned, Müller. The ammunition cooked off. No German workshop could make such repairs in a day, much less in this weather. He turned toward the window. Outside, the sound of another American barrage shook loose dust from the ceiling beams. He spoke softly now, almost to himself. They are fighting with a factory behind every ridge. We are fighting with machines that break themselves when pushed too hard. Weiss felt the war shifting again, not through doctrine or bravery, but sheer unstoppable momentum engineered into the American system. And across the battlefield, Sergeant Cutter called out as another Sherman engine roared back to life. All right, boys, send her forward. Next one's rolling in. As the repaired Shermans rumbled back toward the line, the sky above Cassino cleared just enough for the morning haze to lift.
Columns of smoke from burning farms drifted sideways, revealing the silhouettes of tanks advancing with a confidence that rattled even the most experienced German officers. Lieutenant Joel Nash felt the vibration of his Sherman beneath him, steady, strong, alive once more. He leaned halfway out of the turret, scanning ahead with binoculars. "Feels like she never left," he muttered to his gunner, Corporal Dean Harlow. Harlow patted the new transmission housing they had received only hours earlier. "Probably because half of her didn't," he said dryly. "They just swapped out every broken..."
By late afternoon, the American advance slowed to reorganize. Smoke rose from Cassino's battered outskirts, and the smell of burned rubber, fuel, and scorched masonry hung heavy in the air. Shells still fell sporadically, but the tempo had changed. The Shermans held the ground, engines idling, turrets scanning, crews exhausted yet alert. As dusk crept over the valley, Lieutenant Joel Nash eased his Sherman into a shallow depression near an abandoned vineyard. "Shut her down," he ordered quietly. The engine coughed twice, then died with a final shudder. Inside the tank, the silence felt almost startling. Harlow stretched his cramped legs. "Feels like we've been riding on a sewing machine for 12 hours straight." Bow gunner Private Leon Briggs kicked open the lower hatch. "At least we're still riding." Nash nodded. "That's thanks to those mechanics back there. Without them, we'd be halfway to Naples waiting for a tow truck." He didn't need to say more. When a man's life depended on whether a machine lived or died, the ones who brought machines back from the dead were heroes in their own right. Behind the Sherman lines, the forward repair units were already establishing their new nighttime field. Lamps strung under tarps, generators humming, and cutting torches flickering like small suns beneath the darkening sky. Major Donnelly stepped into the command tent where Chief Warrant Officer Hale was already studying the next batch of damaged tanks. Rain pattered on the canvas overhead. "What do we have?" Donnelly asked. Hale pointed to his clipboard. 6 mobility kills coming in. 1 cracked mantlet, 2 loss of oil pressure cases, likely pump failures, 1 complete engine swap, and 1 with a turret that won't rotate more than 10 degrees. Donnelly grinned tiredly. "Another light night then." Hale chuckled. "Our kind of light." Within minutes, the field became a symphony of metallic rhythms, hammers striking suspension arms, ratchets turning bolts, cranes lifting engine blocks from hulls. Sparks flew as armor plates were cut away and welded back on. Torches hissed, compressors rattled, and spotlights cast towering shadows of men bending over machines like war-era surgeons. Sergeant Cutter took charge of the turret jam case, crawling into the cramped, grease-covered ring with a pry bar and a jaw full of curses. "This ain't a jam, this is a full-on seizure." Private Lawson asked if they could fix it tonight. Cutter spat again. "Kid, we can fix anything tonight." A few yards away, Corporal Tanya Rourke, one of the division's few female specialists assigned stateside but temporarily embedded for emergency field trials, supervised a team aligning a replacement drive sprocket. Her voice cut through the din. "Check that spline. If it isn't seated perfectly, the whole drivetrain will eat itself by morning." It was a strange, mesmerizing sight. A miniature city of industry had appeared overnight in the mud, lit by lanterns and arc welder glare. A city built for one purpose: returning steel to battle. And it wasn't just the Americans who noticed. From a wooded ridge nearly a mile away, an 8-man German reconnaissance team watched through binoculars and scopes. Their mission was to assess the state of the enemy's armor. What they saw left them murmuring in disbelief. Hauptmann Erich Schaefer, the team leader, adjusted his lens and frowned. "That is not a supply depot. That is... what? A factory?" Unterofficer Dietrich squinted. "Too small for a factory, Herr Hauptmann." "But look at the machinery," Schaefer insisted. "Look at the cranes, the lights, the teams working like assembly lines. This is not a field workshop. This is..." He stopped himself, stunned as a Sherman, one they had marked earlier as immobilized with track damage, was lowered off a jack stand and began slowly driving back towards the American lines. Dietrich felt the hair rise on his arms. "They are repairing tanks faster than we can report them." Schaefer muttered a string of curses under his breath. "This is impossible. No army in the world can do this." Yet the proof rolled across the valley in unmistakable silhouette. What unnerved Schaefer most was the speed. A German Panther needed 12 hours just to diagnose damage, and often a week in a rear workshop. A Tiger could break down simply trying to reach its own repair depot. but the Americans had turned the front line into an industrial corridor. Schaefer's radio man tapped his shoulder. "Herr Hauptmann, what shall I tell battalion?" Schaefer took a long, cold breath. "Tell them the Americans have created something new, a moving factory, an army that brings its industry with it." He lowered his binoculars, the implications sinking in. "If this continues," he said quietly, "the Americans will never run out of tanks. Not ever. Not unless we destroy their entire logistical backbone." The radio man began transmitting, but Schaefer already knew the truth. They would never get close enough to destroy it. Not while Shermans kept rolling back into battle as if death itself had become only a brief mechanical inconvenience. The rain eased sometime after midnight, leaving the earth slick and shining under the pale glow of work lamps. By 0300 hours, the forward American repair field was already a forest of silhouettes, cranes rotating, torches flaring, mechanics shouting measurements over the hiss of welding rods. Outside the perimeter, Nash and his crew slept inside their Sherman, the metal hole still radiating the day's heat. Each man dozed in cramped positions, boots on ammunition racks, helmets as pillows, the smell of grease and canvas soaking into their uniforms. Then, at 0445, Nash awoke to a distant but familiar sound, the rumble of tank engines, many of them. He pushed open the hatch, blinking at the cold air. In the pre-dawn half-light, he could see them, 20, maybe more, lined up along the ridge. Shermans newly assembled, or repaired, or patched with fresh armor plates. Some still bore the soot stains of last night's fires. Others gleamed with newly welded seams, catching the torchlight reflection. Harlow climbed out beside him and whistled softly. "Looks like the whole battalion got a resurrection." Nash nodded, and the Germans are gonna hate what they see in about 30 minutes. By 0515, the mobile repair field was packing up. Portable forges cooled, cranes folded back into transport position, tool chests were locked down. The factory that had existed in the mud only hours earlier dissolved into trucks, trailers, and half-tracks, ready to move again. Major Donnelly strode through the clearing, inspecting the line of newly repaired Shermans. "What's the count?" he called to Hale. Hale consulted his clipboard. 13 fully repaired, 4 more serviceable with limitations, 1 still waiting on a final drive, needs rear area work. Donnelly grinned. "So we're sending 17 forward, that'll do." He raised his radio handset. "Command, maintenance battalion reporting. Armor is ready for renewed offensive." The answer crackled back almost instantly. "Good work, Major. Armor thrust begins at first light." And first light came fast. A thin band of gold creeped over the ridges, washing across the valley, illuminating the wet grass, the churned earth, the bodies of broken vehicles abandoned by both sides. As the sun climbed, the silhouettes of the Shermans sharpened. Engines roared to life in chorus. Tracks snapped forward. The armored line began to move. On the German ridge, Oberleutnant Weiss was already awake. He had barely slept. He stood beside his observation post with binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the American line for one simple reassurance, that the tanks they had destroyed yesterday were still gone. He found no such comfort. As the sun cleared the horizon, the valley floor erupted with movement. Shermans advancing in organized waves, their hulls glistening with dew and welding burns. The very tanks he had watched die, burning, disabled, abandoned, were among those returning. The resurrected machines led the attack. Weiss lowered the binoculars slowly. Kruger approached, fastening the chin strap of his helmet. "Herr Oberleutnant, we're being ordered to hold the ridge at all costs." Weiss did not respond immediately. Kruger continued, voice tightening. "We have only 1 operational Panther and 3 Panzer IVs. The rest are still in repair. They won't be ready until..." "They will not be ready at all," Weiss said quietly. "Not in time." He gestured helplessly toward the valley. The Americans repair their tanks in hours. Ours take days, sometimes weeks. How do we hold when the enemy returns faster than we can reload? Kruger stood in silence. Below them, the American armored spearhead gathered momentum. Chains of Shermans advanced like a rolling tide, one that no amount of tactical brilliance could push back forever. In their midst, Nash's newly repaired Sherman surged forward again, engine humming steadily. Harlow loaded their first round of the morning. Briggs braced himself at the bow gun. They could see the monastery in the distance, smoke curling around its shattered walls. The battle for Cassino was far from over, but the psychological war was already shifting. Not because American tanks were invincible, but because they refused to stay dead. On the German ridge, Weiss finally spoke, his voice low. "Send the report to battalion. Tell them the truth." Kruger nodded. "And what is the truth, sir?" Weiss exhaled. "That the Americans do not fight alone. Their factories fight with them." A moment later, the valley erupted in the thunder of American armor charging uphill, Shermans moving with the relentless confidence of an army backed by an industrial empire. Weiss watched them come, the inevitability sinking deep into his bones. For the Germans, this battlefield had revealed a new kind of enemy. Not just soldiers, not just tanks, but a war machine that repaired itself faster than destruction could keep pace. The tank line surged forward, and the German officers finally understood. The Americans could afford to lose tanks. The Germans could not.